Alright, you have cards and you know how to play. Now that the infinite possibilities of Magic have started to spread out before you, you know what time it is? Oh, no, Zoe, sorry, not dinner time, but even better, deck building time! Huh? In Magic, your deck is called a library, and that's for a very good reason. A library is a personal thing, something you've collected and tailored just to you over time. And this is how you should think of your Magic deck, as an expression of you. How do you like to play? Are you out just to win? Do you want to see if you can pull off cool combos or get world-shaking creatures out on the board? Or do you really just love squirrels and want to see if the squirrel-based deck you've been dreaming of is just for the memes or actually viable? When building your wizard library, you can get as creative as you want to. Some decks will fall apart. Some will fail spectacularly. Some will just be silly. And some might just give everyone a good laugh when they finally realize what your deck's up to. But whatever happens, know two things. You're going to play better with a deck that best fits your playstyle, and every loss is an opportunity to think about how to refine your deck for the future. That said, here are a few rules of thumb for building your first couple of decks. In the majority of decks, you'll want 60 cards. That's the minimum you're allowed to play with for most constructed play. And now you may say to yourself, I have all these great cards. I need to put more than 60 in my deck. But remember, in the course of a game, you won't usually draw all 60 cards. So every extra card you put in there just makes it that much less likely you're going to see the cards you're most excited to use. You'll also want to make sure that you have the right amount of land in your deck. The general rule of thumb being 40% of your deck should be land. So in a 60-card deck, that's 24 lands. And of course, you can adjust this by losing a few lands if most of your spells don't cost too much, or adding a few more to your deck if you need more mana to play more expensive spells. Which leads us to our next point, one that actually took me a long time to learn. It's no fun, and usually involves losing, if you have to spend your first 5 turns laying down a land and passing. You want to make sure you have enough low-cost spells in your deck, things 3 mana or under, so that you can actually be playing early on. Now, just how many low-cost spells depends a lot on the deck type you're playing, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. But don't be afraid to put between 15 or 20 1, 2, or 3 cost spells in your deck, because after all, if you draw them later, you can always play 2 in a turn. So what kind of decks can you build? Well, an unbelievable variety, really. But here, we're going to talk about the 4 most common: aggro decks, control decks, combo decks, and mid-range decks. Aggro decks get creatures out fast and don't stop swinging until their opponent falls over. These decks are usually filled with goblins, peasants, or soldiers, and rarely have many cards costing more than 3 mana. Control decks, on the other hand, take their time, trying to stymie their opponent's plans until they can enact their own. These decks are usually chock full of counterspells, creature removal, and card draw to keep their opponent from doing anything until they run out of resources. Next, we have combo decks. Decks which find a few cards that synergize incredibly well together and build everything around getting them out. Like this Infinite Raptor combo. Zoe, please cue the carnage.
Whoa, no dinosaurs, they all hit the board, and they won't ever stop spawning. There are more right there. Oh no, we are scared. This combo won't end until we're dead.
As you just saw, these decks basically feature cards they need for their combo, or cards that help them draw those cards so the combo can go off. Then there's mid-range. And mid-range is kind of the hardest to explain, because it's a deck that's slower than aggro, but faster than control. And it usually features what we call value cards. Cards that, while not necessarily cheap, are effective for their mana cost or offer strong effects as soon as they're played. So how do all these decks match up? Well, aggro decks only have one plan. Go for the face! They have to beat mid-range and control decks before their more powerful cards just take over. Not to mention, they need to knock a combo player to 0 health before that deck can get its combo out, or it's game over. Control decks try to slow aggro and mid-range decks enough that they can take over with card draw or large creatures. But against combo decks, on the other hand, they have to be very careful to save their removals and counters to take out key pieces of their opponent's combo. After all, if you can stop Voltron from coming together, all you have to deal with is a bunch of cats. Combo, on the other hand, just has to last long enough against aggro to get its combo out. So it's going to need some small creatures to keep it alive. Against mid-range and control, it's also going to use these small creatures to try to force its opponent to use up its resources so it can safely play its combo down the line. But now that we've seeded all of that information into your brain, here is truly the most important deck building advice we can possibly give you. Are you ready?
Just go make something fun.
Yeah, and if you're playing Arena, you'll get a pile of pre-built decks to give you an idea of how it's done. You'll get a bunch of ideas to start from, and some good examples of how to put a deck together. And if you're not ready to build a whole deck yet, just try modifying some of those. Find a few cards you think aren't that great in them, and try replacing them with something else. Sure, it's not always going to work out, but to be honest, that's kind of the fun. Just go back and tweak again. You don't have to get it right the first try, because in the end, the cost of losing a game of Magic is honestly another game of Magic. And the reward for winning a game of Magic is another game of Magic. But if you're looking for more ideas, there's always the internet! You know, that big place made of tubes you're watching this on right now. Places like Channel Fireball or MTG Goldfish are a great place to start. So now that you have the tools to become a deck-building dynamo, join us next time as we delve into the final step of learning to play Magic, and the one I've personally been the most excited to talk about since this series started down the path of the Planeswalkers, learning the psychology behind Magic. And not to toot my own horn, but I've got it down pretty well. Wait, what do you mean you attack with everything? That's a pretty bold move, Cat. Okay, fine. You know what? I'll declare my blockers. Unless that's what you want me to do. You have a trick up your sleeve. You don't have sleeves. Okay, I'm spiraling and you're playing me, Cat. Maybe I spoke too soon. Is it next week yet?
Can I take a look at your creatures? Let's see. Cat. Yeah, okay. I'm getting the theme. How'd you get the forest?